Excellent. All right, my friends. Well, welcome. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your evening. I know everybody's busy in the middle of the week on a Wednesday night, so thank you for taking time out of this. We're gonna try to scoot through as much as we can in an hour. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of kick us off with talking about different things about a functional wellness journey as it pertains to your hormone health and what that might look like. And then I also want to kick it over to my friends Lauren and Kara to share their stories and their journeys, because I find that sometimes when we hear other people's stories, we realize, oh my goodness, I'm not alone. Like this is exactly what I've been experiencing. So we're here to answer questions for you as we go. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat. You can, at the very end, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question verbally, that's totally fine too. But just know that we're here for you. We're here to offer as much value as possible in this hour. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of who I am, because you're probably like, who is this girl? This is not necessarily who invited me to this. So I want to make sure that I share my story. But I'm going to actually share my screen because I have some slides for you. I've learned that people really like, and I shared my desktop, which was like the worst idea. People really like when I share slides because it's much easier to follow along. So let me hit present here. Excellent. Okay, so I've titled this "Normal is not optimal," and there's a reason behind that, right? Because I find myself saying this phrase like 100 times a day. So many women will come to me and say, I don't know, teach me about hormone health. I'm not sure what's going on with me. My check engine light is flashing. I've had these symptoms. I'm tired. I'm not sleeping at night, or my cycles are getting wonky, or all of a sudden I feel like I'm snapping at my husband, or whatever the case is, right? And when I tell my doctor says, your labs are normal. Everything's normal. This is just part of perimenopause, or this is just part of aging. That's my favorite. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit of my story, and I'm going to share with you why I created what I created and why the Sync program even exists. Because I have found that when I really can teach women that normal is not the same as optimal, they can really step into what I call their maximum energy. And so I want to kind of set the precedent tonight with this idea that normal is not optimal and that everything should be measured in energy. Okay, so we get really hung up, I think, sometimes on what I call diet culture, right? Like we're really obsessed with like, why do I have this belly fat, or my arms wiggle, or whatever, right? Like we're so conscious about how we look. But when I really meet with women and I really dig deeper, we ask more questions pertaining to, how do you really feel? Like, what is your energy? How are you showing up in the world? Are you really the best for those you love, right? Are you showing up as a vibrant, energetic mother? Are you waking up in the morning with energy, with enthusiasm, or are you dragging through the day, needing the caffeine, again, feeling like you're snapping at your spouse? Like, this is the difference between living in maximum energy and really suffering, right? And accepting normal. So I don't want you to accept normal anymore. I want you to accept optimal. And I want you to know that everything having to do with your hormone health and how you feel is completely within your control. It's not up to a doctor necessarily, right? You might need a doctor on your side, but it's up to you to step into this and to really step into what I call hormone literacy, understanding your menstrual cycle, understanding your menstrual health, understanding your hormone health as a whole. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things tonight. Trust me, there's a deep dive for each of the things we're going to talk about. I'm going to just scratch the surface tonight just to give you a little bit of information about it. But I do have a podcast called the Sync Your Life Podcast, SYNC. We go a lot deeper there on different topics if you want to go deeper there. But I want to make sure that you understand that we're going to blow through this as quickly as we can. But we also want you to understand, if you take nothing else away from this, that stepping into that energy requires you also stepping into that hormone literacy. It requires you to understand more about your body, so that you can advocate for yourself, so that you can ask the right questions, so that you can get answers to why you're feeling off, if you're feeling off, and so that you can reach that energy. So my story, I'm going to give you a shortened version of it. When people ask me, like, how did you end up in hormone health? I'm always like, well, I ended up in it very unfortunately. It was not my goal to end up in hormone health. I actually thought I would be working for like a book publishing company as an editor somewhere, if you would have asked me back in college. But what happened was, soon after I got married, I started experiencing chronic migraines. I had migraines throughout my teenage years and college, but all of a sudden in my early 20s, they became chronic, meaning they were all the time. And so you name it, I tried it for migraine. I tried all the preventative medications. abortive medications. I saw multiple neurologists. I had 4 neck surgeries. I was on so many medications at one point that it actually gave me kidney stones, which sent me to a urologist. So then I was seeing all the ologists at one point in my 20s. And I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. I had landed the job that I thought was my dream job right out of college. I was unable to really perform in that job because I was so miserable with the migraines, so much so that I went on disability. I had to have like the fluorescent lights shut off above my cubicle at work because I couldn't focus. So it really started to negatively impact the quality of my life. I put on 35 pounds. Of course, my husband and I had newly married. It was really challenging for our marriage to go through that, especially early on in our marriage. So things were starting to crumble because of this health issue that was popping up. And like I said, you name the ologist, I saw them. I saw every possible specialist. And no one ever really talked to me much about hormones. And I always kind of posed the question, like I would ask my OBGYN, like, are these headaches possibly hormonal? No, 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 no. They're most likely not hormonal. Your labs are normal, right? And so it wasn't until a good friend of mine, we were on a walk one day, we were hiking in the woods, and I pulled out my painkiller. It was like a little blue pill out of my pocket. And I said, Jen, I'm taking this pill right now, just in case you see me taking it. And I just want you to know that I carry these in my pocket now. Like this is apparently part of my life story. I'm taking these painkillers every day so that I can function and do these hikes with you and have friends and have a relationship with my spouse. And she was like, Jenny, I know you've done it all. I know you've been looking for your Dr. House, the person that's going to tell you, aha, you have mold in the gutter and that's the cause. She's like, but in reality, my friend, she's like, you are your own best doctor. And so she's like, you need to start figuring out like what you can do to learn about your body, because maybe you're just not asking the right questions. So she referred me to a doctor who was an MD technically, but she was functionally minded, a functional medicine practitioner. And she said, I want you to see this doctor. I know you've seen the whole gamut. You've basically been everywhere but the Cleveland Clinic, but you need to see this one particular doctor. I assure you it's a different approach. So I went to this functional medicine doctor. I had some testing done, and sure enough, within one appointment, she was like, you've got a lot of things off. Like you've got some nutritional deficiencies, you've got some hormone imbalance issues. I was essentially creating no progesterone after coming off of the birth control pill. And she's like, I really think that we can take you off of all these pharmaceutical things that they've been trying you on. And I think we can try some natural supplements and some bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I wish I had video footage of my reaction in that moment, because I was literally like, okay, lady, like, sure. Okay. Like they have cut into my neck at this point. Like, but if you think that this yam cream that you're going to give me is the thing, I guess we'll try it. So I listened to her because I had nothing to lose. And within 3 months, my migraines went from every day, all the time, to just being around my period and being around my cycle. And it was at that point that I knew that we were onto something. I was starting to step into that maximum energy, and it was like game on, right? Like all of a sudden I started feeling better. I got into health and fitness. I got into nutrition. I started getting into just this amazing feeling that I'd really never felt before, at least for a really long time. And so that's how my journey into health coaching began. Started with Body, which it's now Body, used to be Team Beachbody, and really got involved in the home fitness programs, got involved in, like I said, nutrition, got my personal training license, my nutrition license. And then finally in 2020, before the pandemic ever occurred, I started to really, really, really dial into a lot of the science that was being done on women in the exercise and nutrition space. I was introduced to Dr. Stacy Sims, who is one of the many pioneers in this space, one of the very few, I guess, doctors who are out there saying, hey, we should study women. Finally, let's study women and how their bodies are different. I don't know if anybody's ever told you this before or not, but women are not studied in the research for a lot of things, for healthcare, but also for things like different diet regimens and different exercise training programs. All of the science, for the most part, has been done on men. When researchers are asked, why don't you study women? The answer is because they're too complex because of their hormones. Because we have highs and lows of our sex hormones each and every month, it makes us too complicated, right? Whereas a man is a constant steady state, we'll just study him instead. So it hasn't been until the last 10 or 12 years that we're finally starting to see research done on women. And so having my story and knowing where I came from with hormones, I knew this was a critical piece. And so when I was introduced to Stacy Sims and her work, I took her courses, which then led me into getting my integrative health practitioner license and going down the avenue of virtual health consults with women and all these different things that I'm now doing. But for that period of time before the pandemic happened, I started to feel like this was information that I wanted every woman to know. Like, this is not just something I can keep to myself. Like, this is really pivotal information. And so I created the Sync digital course, which we'll talk about that. But the course was created so that women could come into it and learn not only how to work with their physiology instead of against it, right? How to work, how the female body should be training, how the female body should be eating in order to really reach that energy, but also what it might look like to go deeper and how to start a functional wellness journey, how to get started with the right doctor, and how to get the right testing to really get to the root cause of what's going on for you. So again, I started it in hormone health, very unfortunately, through my own struggle. That struggle also involved years of infertility. There's other pieces that I'm leaving out and giving you the short story version, but I've had to really learn my way through to figure this out because this stuff just isn't taught. I don't know about you guys, but like middle school sex ed class was like how to not get pregnant. It was not, at least for me, it was not like, this is your anatomy and these are the things that are happening each month and this is how you might be feeling. And by the way, you're a woman, so you should never feel the same. Like, no one ever said that. And so I really feel like society puts so much influence on the way we feel, right? There's sort of this pandemic going on. I don't know if you've noticed, I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old daughter, and I see it even at this age, right? This not enoughness for women, right? Like, we're constantly comparing ourselves to other women, blame it on social media or whatever. But it really comes from this place of not understanding ourselves. If we can understand ourselves, we will then accept ourselves. And I see this every single day as I educate women on how they're actually supposed to be feeling and really giving them permission to feel the way that they do and the way that their physiology is designed. And it's game changing. When you realize that you have this unique physiology that's really just trying to squeeze into the box of a man's world, you start to see that. So, all right. So again, we're measuring everything in energy. And I want to kick us off with this, right? I want to kick us off with this statistic because it's huge and it applies to the majority of women. 72% of women will deal with hormone imbalance, if not before perimenopause, then during perimenopause. So what is perimenopause? Let's touch on that because a lot of people think, oh, I'm in menopause or I've been in menopause for a few years. Well, menopause by definition is just a birthday. It's a birthday. It's 12 months to the day from your last period. So if you've gone exactly 12 months with no period, congratulations, you're in menopause. It's a birthday. But there's this decade or so leading up to menopause that is known as perimenopause. And this is when we start to see a slow, steady decline in sex hormones leading up to the big event, the menopause event. So I like to use the analogy of a cruise ship leaving the dock. Right? That's your ovaries essentially waving farewell. They're like, hey, it's been real here. It's been awesome being fertile for you for all these years, but this is just our warning. Like, we're peacing out, right? Next 8 years, we're out of here. But I have a question for you. Once you enter menopause, do you no longer have sex hormones? Most women don't know this answer. After menopause, you still have sex hormones. You have estrogen, testosterone, even small amounts of progesterone. So what happens in this transition phase is pivotal because what's happening is your ovaries are no longer cranking out the sex hormones, but you still have sex hormones. So where are they coming from? When you start to understand this, you can start to understand why the traditional methods of diet culture don't work. What happens is your ovaries stop producing sex hormones and your adrenal glands, which are these tiny glands that sit above your kidneys, they start to produce those sex hormones kind of in replacement, right? Those adrenal glands have one job your whole life. From the moment you're born till the moment you die, the adrenal glands are there for one reason, and that is survival. They produce cortisol. Cortisol is your fight or flight hormone. It's what keeps you alive. It's what helps you outrun the bear, right? So if it's responsible, if these glands are responsible for your stress and your cortisol, right, your survival, and now all of a sudden the ovaries are like, hey, by the way, we're done here. Here's our 2-week notice. And now they have to take on the job. You can see where all of a sudden these adrenals become a little more taxed, right? All of a sudden they're like, wait a minute. So now we're doing 2 things. We're handling reproductive hormones. Now we're handling stress hormones. This is a kind of a big cluster, right? So during that decade of perimenopause, this is when we see a lot of women say, everything that I used to do is no longer working, or I'm trying to work out harder, or I'm trying to eat less, I'm cutting back my carbs and I can't lose the weight. Or they'll say, why do I have this middle? Why do I have this belly fat around my middle, right? Because your body as a woman is designed physiologically to survive over reproduce. So your number one goal for your body is survival, which is why the adrenal glands, if you think about hormones in a hierarchy, your adrenal glands come first, because you're always going to be right. We got to make you live before we can help you reproduce. So this is where we start to see, when the reproductive hormones start to shift, when we start to see that perimenopausal transition, we start to see things like the belly fat, the weight gain in the hips and thighs, the brain fog, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, the hot flashes in some cases, right? Whatever the case is. So if this is you, if you're like, oh my gosh, I've never heard this before, just know that everything you're about to learn is what I call unlearning. It's unlearning the things that we've been taught that are no longer serving us, because now we finally have the research to say that doesn't work. Ketogenic diets, this doesn't work for women. Intermittent fasting doesn't work for the majority of women, right? These intense style training programs with all the HIIT cardio doesn't really work for women, right? So we're finally piecing this together. We're making sense of it all. So 72% of women will deal with a hormone imbalance at some point in their lives. So this will all make sense, because as we talked about the transition, now I want to talk to you about something called the four-legged hormone chair. This is a basic principle. Again, I teach it on the podcast. I go way deeper in the Sync course. But a lot of women, when they hear this, it helps them make sense of hormones. And hopefully you'll come away with this saying, that girl at least had some good stories, right? If nothing else, like these are some analogies for you. But the four-legged hormone chair, right? If you picture your average standard kitchen chair, it looks just like this one. It's four legs, right? These four legs represent the four legs of your endocrine system. One is your cortisol, which we just talked about. That's your stress response, your fight or flight. Another leg of the chair is your blood sugar. Your blood sugar, of course, actually, we'll talk about this in a second, but it actually plays a huge vital role as it pertains to the adrenals as well. The third leg of the chair is your sex hormones. So your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, FSH, LH, and then your thyroid. Okay, so adrenals, blood sugar, sex hormones, and thyroid. If I ask you the question, what happens if I were to saw off just 1 inch of one leg of the chair, you would tell me that the chair would become wobbly, right? This is why a lot of doctors, a lot of researchers back away from research on women, because when that chair can become wobbly, you can have symptoms that are in all different directions. You can have thyroid symptoms, you can have cortisol symptoms, you can have a lot of things, because now all of a sudden that endocrine chair is off balance. In layman's terms, this is what we call in our society hormone imbalance. Why am I dealing with hormone imbalance all of a sudden, right? Why are things all wonky? So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to help you figure out which leg of the chair is the one that's been sawed off, which one is causing the other legs to wobble. And that, my friends, is called root cause medicine. Getting to the root of what's going on for you, so that you're not just adding band-aids all, for me in my migraine journey, taking the different medications, trying the different surgeries. Nobody was really getting to the root of it, right? As soon as I started to supplement the things that my body was not absorbing and the things that my body wasn't utilizing, game on, right? So health is individual to you. And when we try to fit ourselves into the box of, my friend Susie's lost 15 pounds intermittent fasting, I can assure you it's almost never going to work, right? Because we need to know what your unique bio-individuality is, and we need to know what leg of your chair is the weakest. So I'm going to throw this in there for you too, because this sometimes does get asked. The floor on which the chair sits, so whether it's sitting on a nice sturdy kitchen hardwood floor, or if it's sitting on rocky soil or sand, the foundation on which it sits is your gut. So if you've heard of the gut microbiome, this is why the gut influences so much of our hormone system. So they kind of go together. All right, so one of my mentors, Dr. Sarah Gottfried, says this. She says, we need to change the conversations that women have in the doctor's office and on social media about what they eat, how they work out, and how they feel about their health and bodies. I had to put this here because this is the purpose of this webinar, to be able to change the conversation, to be able to tell you you're not alone, and to be able to tell you that normal is not optimal. So let's come back to that idea of root cause medicine versus traditional approach. So I always want to start with the caveat. I am not here to shame modern medicine whatsoever. I always like to say modern medicine saved my dad's life. He was diagnosed with cancer when I was 12 years old. He was given 2 weeks to live, and he now lives across the lake from me, and he's 74 years old. So modern medicine saved my dad's life. I have nothing negative to say about it. But through my own journey and what I've seen with a lot of women, I believe that there is a lot going on in the modern medicine world that is misleading women. I think that a lot of women are being gaslit in doctors' offices. They're being told things like, it's just part of perimenopause, it's just part of aging, or the doctor just simply doesn't know. And so that's what I hope you take away tonight, is this idea that just because my doctor said something is normal doesn't mean that that's the path I have to take. Right? You can always seek out a second opinion. You can always investigate things for yourself and really take on that hormone literacy so that you can get to the root cause of what's going on. So you can probably tell from this picture, right? What I like to say is a lot of modern medicine doctors will just say, you know, they're going to look at your labs, for example, and they're going to say, everything's in the normal range. Well, if no one's ever told you this before, I don't know if you've ever taken time to look at your lab tests. I'm a nerd, so this was something I picked up on a few years ago. But the normal ranges that are identified on those lab tests are like in a lot of cases, it'll be like 5 to 500. It's considered normal for something. And you're like, okay, well, I'm normal. I'm in the normal range. I don't know about you, but like, I want to know, where should I be? Like, what's the optimal range? Maybe optimal is more like 200 to 300, right? That's different. It's different. Your energy is different, maximum, or, optimal versus normal. Your labs are different, optimal to normal. So this is the difference between a modern medicine approach. They look at that normal range, which, by the way, is determined by the total number of people, the total pool of people having the test done. So that includes healthy people and unhealthy people. That includes both males and females. Does that make sense? So we want to look at what's optimal for Lauren at this age as a female in the transition of life or wherever she is. What's optimal for that, right? It's very specific. So a root cause medicine approach, otherwise known as a functional medicine approach, is a different lens through which we look at those labs. We actually are able to look at it and say, this is not optimal. These levels are not optimal. So as opposed to, oh my gosh, your house is on fire. Oh my gosh, your thyroid is way out of control. Let's put you on thyroid medication because now we have a house fire here. Instead, it's saying, we just noticed that you have some matches in the basement laying near some loose newspaper. And we feel like these two things, I don't know, like this could be a potential house fire, right? So it's proactively looking at avoiding the fire and avoiding, pharmaceuticals in a lot of cases. So I find that really thinking about it in the terms of root cause versus traditional approach can really be helpful. Okay, so we talked about this. Most exercise and nutrition research and even healthcare research has been done on men until the last decade. So again, understanding that men and women are different, and what might work for a man may not work for a woman. I saw this firsthand myself when I owned a gym. My husband and I owned a gym for 6 years before my oldest daughter was born. And our gym was located on a strip in Indianapolis with a bunch of car dealerships. So I actually had a lot of male clients at my gym. So I had a good mix of both men and women. And I started to notice right away that there was a difference between the results that women would get versus the results that men would get. A lot of times, men would come in and they would commit to the exercise portion of the program, but they didn't really follow the meal plan. They just kind of ate what their wife would make them. And then the women that would come into my program would say, give me all the meal plans. I'm going to follow it to a T, right? What's the shake you're drinking? What's this and that? What's the supplement? Like, give me all the things. And they would do all the workouts. And at the end of 90 days, we would do assessments. We would do fit test assessments. We would do like measurements. We would do all the things. And I started to notice really quickly that the men were having drastically different results than the women. The women might lose a little bit of weight and they might feel better. They might fit in their clothes better, but a lot of them would still struggle. They would still struggle. And now hindsight's 2020. And so after learning what I've learned, especially through Stacey Sims and others, I have learned so much about how women really should be training and eating in alignment with our cycle. Our menstrual cycle is a superpower. And when we try to treat our bodies like it's the same every single day, in other words, like a man's, we can start to see a lot of issues pop up. This is why things like intermittent fasting doesn't work for women as well as it does for men. This is why ketogenic diets don't work as well for women as they do for men, because our bodies have this extra layer, this extra superpower in our menstrual cycle. So as you can see from this chart, my good friend Dr. Page always likes to say, you know, if you looked at the female sex hormone chart, it looks like a bunch of roller coasters like superimposed on each other. So when people say, I think my hormones are out of balance, you're like, what does that even mean? Because they're never really steady, you know, they're always moving. So, but what we see here is different rises and falls in our hormones, right? We have different, the first half of our cycle, estrogen is the more dominant hormone. In the second half of the cycle, the progesterone is the more dominant hormone. And these hormones play different roles in our brain health and in the way that we live in the world. Estrogen is our more outgoing hormone, our libido hormone. Progesterone tends to be our more calming, anti-anxiety, better sleep hormone. So we're constantly changing over the course of the month, right? We're actually infradian beings. We're lunar beings. We follow the phases of the moon. So not only are we circadian, right? We wake up in the morning, we go to sleep at night, just like men do. We have this extra layer, this infradian layer of following the cycles of the moon and following the different energies of our cycle. So why that matters is because if you're doing the same thing, right? If you're following a fitness calendar designed for a man, you're just going to Orange Theory classes. You're just, you know, maybe you're following a low carb diet or something, and you're following the same regimen every day. You could essentially be working against your female physiology. If you want to work with your physiology, you cater to the estrogen in a certain way with your training and your diet. You cater to the progesterone in a certain way with your eating and your exercise. Like, it matters. And it doesn't have to be this like distinct, like specific science. Like, women always want to get hung up on like, well, what's the macros and what's all the thing? Like, don't get all hung up on the details. Instead, just say, have I been doing this the way society has taught me? Or is there something here that I can learn about how a woman can do this better for herself? So again, health is individual. It's really about digging first to find your root causes. Now, I don't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with you, right? Like, that's not what I want you to take away from this. I don't mean like there's cancer or anything. There's no like necessarily wrong. It's just more of how can we optimize what's going on with you? Okay. So when we can try to figure out what is the weak leg of your chair, how can we supplement that accordingly, right? That becomes one aspect of what I call the fundamentals of hormone balance. When we can supplement your deficiencies, when we can address exercising and eating in alignment with your cycle, which are the other two aspects of your fundamentals. And then when we can also focus on your sleep, we can start to really help you enter that maximum energy. So, all right, my friends, I want to make sure that I stop my share because we want to have other people talk here as well. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, does anybody have any questions so far before I hand it over to our testimonials? I haven't even looked at the chat. So, okay. If you have any questions for me, just let me know, and I'm going to come back at the end as well and share some stuff. But I want to make sure that we turn it over to Lauren and to Kara. So Lauren, I'm going to ask you to go first, if you don't mind. So yeah, so Lauren came into the Sync course and became a Sync certified coach, she and Kara both, and has had her own journey, which is why I wanted to bring her on here. I wanted her to share more about her journey and what she's experienced and the different things that she's learning, because you can hear from me, but I want you to hear from others as well. So Lauren, I would love for you to just share with us whatever you're willing to share. Like, share with us your story and what you found valuable and what has been the biggest, most pivotal things for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lauren. I am 47 years old. I am literally going like everything Jenny talked about. I was like, this is my life. This is what I'm going through. And I think it's so crazy because my daughter's, I have two kids. I have a 18-year-old daughter and I have a 14-year-old son. And I help at my daughter's dance studio. And just yesterday I was there and I heard two women talking out of the corner. I can hear them talking. I just doing my own thing. Don't want to get involved in anyone's conversations. But she was literally saying, like, I am going through hormone hell and I've got to figure out a way to figure this out. And I feel like not enough women talk about it. And I want to be like, amen, sister. Like that is so true. And I just feel like I'm so grateful for Jenny for this because we need to talk about this more. So about 8 years ago, I started on my own health journey. I had really just enjoyed life a lot, enjoyed food, enjoyed cocktails. I lived it up. I did all the things. And I realized coming back from a competition, actually, that I had zero energy in my life. And I needed to figure out how to get that back because I had 2 kids that were going to need everything I've got. And I was just needed to say, like, I'm drawing a line in the sand and I'm going to do this. So joined Body. Now at the time it was Beach Body, obviously, like Jenny talked about, and did great. I did all the things. I lost 40 pounds. Like it was incredible. Like I loved every minute of it. I loved the mindset piece. I loved that it was just simple things that I could do. I can get the workout in, I can get my meal plan in or whatever, and I could do the things. And that was great until it wasn't. And that was about probably pre-COVID was when things started to change a little bit. And where it started was they found a nodule on my thyroid. And they were like, let's just watch it. We're going to keep an eye on it. No big deal. Nothing to stress out about. I said, okay. So then COVID happened and it didn't get watched probably for 3 years. And by the time I got back in, it had gotten so large, they now classified it a goiter. So I was like, I don't really know what that means. Tell me more about that. And so I was sent to all these different doctors. We ran all these different tests and come to find out they're like, okay, we've got to take it out. Like it's going to have to come out now or it's going to have to come out later. Like it's up to you to decide. And so after a lot of discussion with me and my husband, we were like, let's just do it now while I'm healthy. Things are good. You know, I feel like I can handle the surgery. We can get through things. Sounds good. I ended up going to Chicago, got the half out. They ended up telling me my other half did have nodules on it. So it could come down the pipeline that would have to come out. But they're like, let's just save half your thyroid. You'll be good to go. And I was like, well, does it matter if, like, how is that going to work? And they're like, don't worry. Your other half will pick up the slack. You'll be good to go. I said, okay. So going through my recovery, I'm just not feeling right. I have no energy. I'm really lethargic. I'm really struggling with everything. Go in for my follow-up. She runs blood work. She says, everything is normal. And I said, okay, but I'm not feeling good. And she's like, it's a major surgery. It's recovery. That's the way it's going to be. You'll be okay. I said, okay. So went back with my doctor. She did she wanted to do some blood. He wanted to do some blood tests. And he says, well, I mean, you're kind of low. It's not bad. You're still in the normal range, but let me just give you some levothyroxine. That should cure what you've got going on. Not knowing anything, I said, okay, that sounds good. Didn't want to be on medicine, but let's just go with it because it's going to make me feel better. So going along my journey, and all of a sudden, by the grace of God, I somehow find someone who's following Jenny, who's taking this course, and I'm starting to pick up some things she's talking about. And I'm like, okay, I'm like digging this, like, tell me more. And I'm just like soaking all this information because I'm like, I know I'm not right. Like, what's going on? And thankfully, along the path, I connected in with Jenny, heard about the course, read all about it on her website. And I'm like, I've got to take this because I've got to be better about knowing what I'm about to tackle. Because in my head, I'm on this medicine. I'm probably on this path for who knows what. I was still in my head. I'm like, I'm sure I'm not perimenopausal or whatever this is that she's talking about. I'm going to probably be okay, but it's coming down the pipeline. Well, very rapidly, I realized that I was not in the right spot, took her course. She encouraged me to go and find another doctor. And this course made me realize that there was so much that I didn't know. And it encouraged me to pretty much fire my current doctor because he wasn't listening to me. He just kept telling me everything was normal. There was no reason to do any more blood work. And through some networks in town, I found someone who was a functional provider. She worked with both functional and with Western medicine, and everyone that she had touched was getting some amazing results. And I'm like, great, sign me up. Called her immediately. And I will tell you, from taking the course, it was incredible for me because I walked in, I felt empowered. I felt like I know the kinds of questions to ask. I can ask her what kind of testing we need to get done. And I still didn't realize there was a lot I didn't know, but I at least knew enough to get the ball started. And I felt like, okay, let's figure out what we need to do. And she sat and listened to me and wrote things down, asked me questions. And it was just like, I was so grateful because I got the impression that not everybody has that kind of, you know, communication. So probably then that was just like about, gosh, that was like last summer. Well, then just this last fall and probably like November, I've just quickly started to gain weight, and it's almost like we were testing, doing all kinds of things. We were testing and testing and testing. We couldn't figure out and pinpoint what it was. And finally, she signed up to do the Dutch test because I had been talking to her about it. And she's like, I've been thinking about it. I'm wanting to try to do it. I'm trying to bring it in my practice. She messaged me that day. She's like, I got the Dutch test in. She's like, I'm sending mine out. Are you in? I'm like, yes, let's do this. And so I was so excited because I was just about ready to go almost find someone else, because just because of the knowledge of what I learned from Jenny, I was able to figure out that something else needed to happen. And it's just incredible because now I'm at a point where now I'm about to meet with her on Monday. I feel like my house might be on fire. And to our credit, we've been trying to find the things, but it's been incredible because am I optimal? I'm not. But what I've learned is that I can start to understand my body better. I can start to learn what my optimal is. I can speak and I can be an advocate and I can be an active participant in my own healing. And I feel confident that I'm on the right path. And this, everything about this has given me such comfort to have the community and the knowledge that I can live the third part of my life with energy and with power. And it's not necessarily about the scale, but it's about how I feel and what I can provide for my family. So
Yeah. Yeah. So good. And I love that you said that too, because I'm glad you said that about the doctor, because, I've heard this often where, I mean, almost, I would say on at least a monthly basis, somebody says to me, I started working with this functional doctor and I brought in the questions that you give in the course, and I brought in these different, supplements to ask about and different things. And 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, the doctor that they're working with is like, where did you get this from? Like, where did you learn this from? This is amazing. Like, tell me where I can point more people to this. Because if you think about it, now you're like doctor's, class pet or whatever you want to, because now you understand your body on this next level. So when you're coming into that appointment, you're on a different level there. You're like, I understand this 4-legged chair thing. I understand my thyroid's off. Like, these are the questions I have. And why aren't we testing this? And I want to know about antibodies. And all of a sudden you're firing back these questions and you're talking almost, I don't want to say doctor speak, because we're not going to say that, right? Like, they have considerably more schooling. But at the same point, like, they're now like, oh, this girl's like, she wants answers, like, we're going to get her some answers. So I'm glad you said that, because that has popped up so often. I've never once had a doctor say like, wait, where did you get this? This is terrible. Everything I've heard about has been positive in the direction of, this is amazing. I'm so glad that you asked these questions. Let's dig a little bit deeper. And I love that she pursued the Dutch test too. Awesome. That's so good. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Apparently we got like the purple memo for today. So
I know.
sorry,
I saw that
Kara,
too.
sorry, Kara, we didn't give you the purple memo. But yeah, that's powerful. And the thing is, like, when you can step into that, like, one of my favorite testimonials that I get is when a woman says, I'm sitting in this doctor's office and I just want to say, like, thank you, because I have never before felt confident or excited about a functional medicine doctor's appointment in my life. We now do these consults, which I'll talk about later, and I do them alongside Dr. Paige Gutile, who's an osteopathically trained physician. And I mean, I'm telling you, almost every time we open up our Zoom to meet with somebody in a consult, the person's like, I've been so excited for this. Like, they're excited for it because they feel like they understand. They feel like they understand, and they now know it's not just, I feel off, doctor, tell me what's wrong. Now it's, I feel off and here's what I think might be happening. Can we dig deeper? Which is a totally different conversation. So, all right, Kara, it's your turn, my friend. If you want to go change into something purple, we won't be mad. I'm just
I
kidding.
got my corgi thick sweatshirt on right now.
Nice. Nice. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Kara. Kara, if you want to share your story as well, we would love to hear whatever you want to share.
Yeah. So it's funny when I was listening to Lauren talk, I'm like sitting over here, I'm like, yep, like minus some of the details about thyroid, like there's just so many parallels here. And I feel like a lot of that is, I feel like that's the story for a lot of us. So I would say around 2016 is when I started really just wanting to dial in my fitness. And I would say that, and just, I've always been into health. I've always cared about that type of thing. But I'd say around that time is when I really tried to be more intentional with how I cared for myself. And so, it's that classic story of, I'm in my early 30s at that point, and I could just think about eating healthy or lifting weights. And then within a week or so, I'd start seeing results. And, at the time, people would tell me, like, oh, you better enjoy it while it lasts because your metabolism's not going to be like that forever. You just wait. And, it always kind of annoyed me to hear that because even then, in my late 20s, early 30s, I felt like that just can't be what I have to look forward to in my 40s. I'm going to be 40 this year. And similar to Lauren, like I want this extra third of my life to be the best, one of the best. And I don't want to just be like, well, that's just the way it is. And so, I was going along and things were great. I was doing my 5 a.m. workouts, working full time in HR, still am working full time in HR. But then over the last couple years, I started noticing that my body was not responding the way that it used to. Like I was doing all of the right things, same as, Lauren said, like I was doing all the things, eating healthily, lifting heavy. And I couldn't, like the things that started, that stuck out to me as like, something's wrong is I couldn't even do a push-up anymore. And I'm like, what is going on? Like I've been doing this for years and years. So I was losing my strength. I was gaining belly fat. I was, and now granted, it's not like I was still enjoying my life, but things were just not working the way that they used to. But the biggest thing for me was I wasn't able to fall asleep or stay asleep. And for me, that was just completely out of the norm. Like I was always a heavy sleeper. Like I could fall asleep in minutes and be out the whole night for 8 or 9 hours if you let me. And then I was also waking up with just like almost debilitating anxiety. And while I've always kind of had like periodic anxiety and depression, like just situational throughout my life, this felt to me just very chronic and very like I couldn't make sense of where it was coming from. And I was panicking about the fact that this is never going to go away. Meanwhile, I had been connected with Jenny, like she and I knew each other before she had launched her course. And so I reconnected with her after she launched the course and started diving into all of this. And, I will say that the biggest thing that I have appreciated and gained from this experience, like in just diving into the course and in my own hormone health journey, has been the organization and the roadmap. I'm very much a person who needs to, I need to know, even if I am willing to detach myself from the outcome, because, you can't always, nobody can say like, if you do A, then this is going to happen. I've been able to put myself on a path that I know is right for me. And just, I felt comfortable exploring each step as it comes along. And so little by little, I didn't realize this until I told Jenny. It's funny, I told Jenny before this, I'm like, I don't know if I really feel qualified to share my story here because I don't really have this amazing before and after. Like all of a sudden I'm like 6-pack and have zero anxiety and all these things. But what I realized as I reflected was since I've been doing supplements that are catered to my needs and my deficiencies, my anxiety has decreased. I just hadn't given myself credit for it. Like I hadn't even noticed it until I was like, oh my gosh, like this has exponentially gotten better for me. I'm sleeping through the night almost. Like that's my sleep is a lot better. I'm learning how to leverage my energy at different parts of my cycle, which makes me feel less like I'm beating myself up for not being able to do things. And I think the biggest thing is I feel that I'm more connected with myself. And that is everything to me because I feel that, you know, you not to get all existential here on you, but if as a woman, I feel like if you can't connect with yourself, if you can't really know yourself and know your body and who you are, and you can't give yourself the time of day to even listen to what it is that you need, then how is it that how can we expect to connect deeply with friends and family and our lives and live vibrantly? And I didn't realize that those two things were connected, that me caring for myself and listening to my body was so tied to my ability to connect with my community. And it's just like, you know, it's had, this isn't just about like your own hormone health. This is about like creating a ripple effect in like your entire, how you interact with the people in your circle sphere of influence. So, yeah, like I could talk for, I feel like I could talk
Yeah.
for like hours on this, and
No,
we
it's
could
funny
just
because if you don't care if so I think it's funny because before you joined the course, I remember we had a conversation, because one thing that I've learned about Kara from knowing her for a few years is like, we've got to assess the situation fully before we, like,
Yeah.
let's talk it through. Like I get some of my favorite voice messages are from Kara, because she'll voice message me, and over the course of the 3-minute voice message, she figures out her own solution like every time. So she's a processor, right? So she had messaged me before and was like, I'm thinking about taking your course, but here's the thing. I don't think I really have any hormone issues, right? She's like, I don't really think that, like, I don't know if this is really going to help me. Like, I'm already into health and fitness. And so the one thing that I've seen just in working with you through the course and consults and everything is just how much you're making that connection, like how much that connection now exists of like, oh, like this is why I feel the way I do during this part of my cycle. And like, it's this thing that you didn't know you needed, right? You didn't know you needed that awareness, but now there's this level of awareness that's like explaining a lot of the things that you're experiencing. So,
yeah.
and I love what you said about the community piece too, because I think I say that often on the podcast, right? Like women in general, we wear all the hats. Like we're, wives, sometimes mothers, sometimes daughters, sometimes, sisters and whatever, all the things. And we pour into everybody else. And I know that we've all seen that whole, like, how can you pour from an empty cup or whatever? But it goes beyond just like getting your workout in every day, or, like being mindful of how you eat or whatever. Like it's so much more than that, to where it's like when you can understand yourself on a different level, your tendencies, your personality, the way that you're shifting from week to week. Like when you really dial into that, you can really show up better for other people. Like I'll just be completely transparent. Like I was excited for this webinar because if you know, like I have exited menstrual phase and I'm entering follicular phase. So this timing of this webinar was like perfect. I'm like, I'm ready to socialize, right? Like so when you know that about yourself, you're like, yeah, but like last week, my husband knows, like, this is not the time to like invite my wife on a date night or try to sit next to her on the couch or anything else. Like he's very aware that like, this is my internal time. I need this time to myself. So when you start to learn yourself, you communicate differently with the people in your world, your children, your spouse, your whatever, like everybody, your friends. And when that happens, all of a sudden you just see the world in a different way. Like it really is true. So I'm so glad that you shared that, Kara. I'm so glad. Okay. So thank you guys so much for sharing your stories. I want to share my screen just one more time because I want to give you guys some resources that you can, hang on. Why is it not letting me? Some resources that you can use. Hang on one second here. Let's try this again. Well, why don't I have a share screen option anymore? It like disappeared on me. That's okay. I don't know if I necessarily need it. I could just talk through it. Okay, so I do want to make sure that you guys know that we do have some free resources for you. the first thing I want to mention is as it pertains to that four-legged hormone chair, we want to help you get to the root of what's going on for you, right? We want to know you to help understand like which leg of my chair could be the weakest leg. So I designed something called a hormone imbalance quiz. You can access the quiz by going to sync.jennyswisher.com. You'll see the quiz there. You'll get the results immediately, and it will tell you, based on the symptoms you're experiencing and what you're going through, what most likely could be the weakest leg of your chair. It is not meant to diagnose or prescribe. It's not meant to tell you what's wrong. It's just aimed to help point you in the right direction of maybe your sex hormones are off, or maybe your thyroid is off. So that's a resource for you completely free, as is the Sync Your Life podcast, which I mentioned. That's on all platforms if you want to go deeper on anything that we've talked about today. But we also wanted to give you information too about the course that both Kara and Lauren talked about. It is the Sync digital course, originally created in 2020 to be all about cycle syncing, how to work out and train and eat in alignment with your cycle. And then very quickly morphed into something much bigger, into this entire movement that you've heard about tonight, into this education of hormone literacy and helping women understand their bodies, their menstrual cycles, understanding how to advocate for themselves. So really, it's ultimately a step-by-step roadmap, as Kara said, in navigating your hormone health. From how do you begin? How do you find the right type of practitioner? How do you ask for the right testing? How do you start on the right supplements for you? How do you go about this entire process? And then when you feel like you're getting yourself bio-individually rectified, that's when you can start moving into cycle syncing, which is also part of the course. So it's how to embrace a functional wellness journey, how to cycle sync accordingly. So this course has 6 total modules. We've got cycle synced workout plans. We are actually launching a cycle syncing fitness program in May, which I'm super excited about, which will all be accessible through an app. We have 12 weeks worth of phase-specific meal plans. So meal plans catered to the different phases of your cycle, because like I said before, there's different foods that can encourage different things at different times of your cycle. We also offer a proper testing guide that you can simply print off, download, take to your doctor, ask them, say, this is what I'm looking for. This is the testing that I want done. We have supplement guides. We have endocrine disruption guides. We have all different kinds of things that are at your disposal for you to use so that you can take the guesswork out of this process for yourself. So the course itself is normally priced at $259. We also have a certification option, which if you want to talk about that with the person who invited you here, feel free to have that conversation if you were looking to also get certified. But the course itself is usually retails at $259. For the webinar, we are offering it for $209. So if you're interested in taking us up on that offer, your Sync certified coach will give you a link to order the course. You'll enter the code webinar24. That code is good until tomorrow night at midnight. So it's literally a 24-hour code, webinar24, that will get you the $50 off the course. So in my mind, it is literally a steal to be able to take that type of information and content and knowledge, and not only apply it to your fitness and your nutrition, but also to be able to help you really advocate for yourself in the doctor's office. And this is what it's really all about. So at the very minimum, that's what we have to offer you tonight. Now we've had questions before, so I want to make sure I address this too. This is something that's new and growing. It's growing quickly. Starting last fall, I started doing virtual health consults with, like I said before, Dr. Paige Gutile, who's an osteopathically trained physician out of Ohio. We do these virtually through Zoom. Dr. Paige is a full physician, like she has the ability to do everything from pharmaceuticals to bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, testing, all the things. We do have different packages as it pertains to the consults with Dr. Paige and I. So if you're interested in the course and the consults and all that kind of thing, talk to your Sync certified coach tonight. We'll make sure that we get you set up with everything that you might need. But this is a really great way for you to, I like to say it's a one-stop shop. So you have the ability to not only learn the information for yourself, but also I'm providing you with the doctor and myself to help you work through it as well. So for years, we had just the course, and the number one thing that I found was holding women back was this journey of finding the right doctor. And it really, if you're thinking this, I just want to make sure I say this. It's not as easy as me saying, go look for, a functional medicine doctor, or go look for this credential, because it's really not. It's more specifically what a particular doctor believes in, what they're educated in, what they value, if they've journeyed into bioidentical hormones. Like it's really more about just individual doctors. So I kept finding that here I am educating women in this course on the type of doctor they need. And in some cases, my heart was breaking because women would be like, well, I've been through 3 people and I don't think I've gotten the right person. And so for me to partner with Dr. Page has been amazing. I'm learning so much from her, and it's been amazing to be able to offer that to our community, to say, hey, if you're looking for a solution, we have a virtual solution for you. We can do all of that for you. We can do testing and everything as well. So if that's of interest to you, I wanted to mention that as well. So, all right, my friends, any questions about anything that we covered? And once again, we did this in an hour, which is amazing. Okay, perfect. All right, well, I will make sure that the recording goes out tomorrow, most likely. So you guys will get an email with the recording if you want to tune into it again. But thank you so much for being here. Oh, looks like we just got a quick question. How does that look like for me being in Canada? Dr. Page is able to work with patients in Canada. So the only issue I believe comes with if there was a pharmaceutical component for you specifically, there are sometimes hiccups there. But if you have a local practitioner that you're working with as well, she can coordinate with them as well. So that's something that we've been doing as well. So, okay, perfect. All right, my friends. Well, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll talk soon. Have a good night. Bye-bye. Thanks, Kara. Thanks, Lauren.